Good evening. Welcome back to the Liminal Record. I appreciate all the new viewers and the new subscribers. If you like what you're hearing, feel free to like and subscribe. But as always, grab a blanket, grab some popcorn, and let's get into tonight's stories. Stalkers in the Canyon. About 4 years ago, I was a junior at a small college in LA. Bordering my town was a large cavernous region known as Turnbull Canyon. It's the kind of place that has a healthy amount of creepy folklore surrounding it, with an area emphatically known as Hell's Gates. Stories of cult activity, gang killings, abandoned mental institutions, and the like. It's the kind of thing you hear about any old place old enough to have a reputation. In reality, most of the stories were spurned from a tragedy that occurred years prior. A woman's body was found at the base of the canyon, and from then on the rest is history. Nevertheless, when a photographer friend asked me and another buddy to go out to the canyon in order to take some photos of the LA skyline, I had to oblige. The canyon was about a 30-minute drive from our campus, and we had been listening to the King of Limbs the entire drive, which proved to be the perfect ambiance to get me feeling pretty anxious about our little excursion. I should also note that I'm a pretty anxious guy in general, so traveling out to a remote area preceded by its reputation for scary occurrences admittedly had me thinking twice about that decision. At the top of the canyon, there's a small residential area, a few ritzy houses surrounded by trees and woods. In order to venture into the canyon itself, you have to follow a main trail with several smaller arteries that split off in other directions, but ultimately culminate after a couple miles or so at the base of a steep hill adorned with an old water tower overlooking the city. Anyhow, we parked our car at the top of the canyon road, divvied up the camera gear, and made our way out to the trailhead, around 1 a.m. at this point. After walking the trail for about 5 minutes, Dave, the photographer, decided it was time to set up first shot while Jeff, our other friend, and I kept watch. Eventually he got the shot he needed, and we continued walking for another 5 or so minutes before Dave decided to set up his next shot. At this point, the trailhead had disappeared behind us completely, and we were a little less than a quarter of the way to the water tower. While setting up the tripod, we noticed the faint glow of headlights off in the distance, which was strange because the trail isn't meant for cars, nor is it big enough for them to pass through. If I recall, it's only about 5 feet wide, with shrubbery on both sides. This was clearly a bit of a red flag for us as we were the only people out there, so we immediately packed up our things and ducked off into the brush, waiting for the car to pass on. Eventually, an old pickup truck idled to a stop about 50 yards from where we were hiding. The truck itself was old and rickety, sitting on a lifted chassis, the bed of which was missing entirely. Growing up in the country, I knew it as the type of truck typically owned by backwoods folk who lived in the boonies and preferred to be left to their own devices. We watched in agonizing anticipation as the truck just idled in place for several minutes before flooring it down one of the other trails, the roar of the engine echoing throughout the canyon. Clearly we were spooked at this point, the three of us speculating as to our next step. Jeff and I were reluctant to continue, and Dave assured us that it was probably nothing, perhaps just a guy off-roading, as he put it. So with great reluctance, Jeff and I trudged on behind Dave towards the water tower to get his final shots. Nevertheless, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about that truck. I mean, I knew plenty of people in high school who would go off-roading for fun in the woods, but never on finicky canyon trails barely wide enough to hike on, let alone drive. It just didn't sit right with me. After walking without interference for about an hour, we finally made it out to the water tower. We climbed the hill to the top and took in the view of the city. Dave, once again, started setting up his equipment while Jeff and I stood on both sides of the water tower, keeping watch just in case the truck came back. Nothing. At this point, it's around 3 a.m. Dave decides he's got all the shots he needs, so we pack up our equipment and commit to heading back before it gets too late, seeing how all of us had classes in just a few hours. Just as we're preparing to descend the hill, The truck comes roaring out of the canyon below us, back onto the trail, at which point the driver attempts to climb the hill, revving the engine loudly. Scared witless, the three of us slid off the side of the hill into the brush, clinging onto plants and rocks. As the truck finally made it to the top of the hill, slowly driving around the tower, we could see the glow of the headlights each time it circled above us. After waiting nearly 10 minutes, while also trying not to make any noise, of course, the truck eventually descended the hill, stopping in the middle of the trail, no more than 100 yards away. We watched as a scruffy man, mid-50s, stepped out of the idling truck and into the glow of his headlights, moseying around and looking at the ground. He knelt down, looking at something in the dirt, surveying the area intently. As he did so, it became increasingly apparent that he was tracking something. Our footprints. The next part still chills me to the bone. As my friends and I huddled together watching in complete terror, another man wearing a long, dark parka emerged from the brush, right where we had been walking, joining the other man at his side. Apparently he had been out there the entire time we were walking the trail, just watching us, following behind at a safe distance. The two of them talked for a while, but we couldn't hear a word. They continued scanning the area, looking at our footprints, but eventually got back in the truck and drove off down the road. We sat in silence for a long time, waiting nearly 2 hours just to ensure the coast was clear, at which point we made it like hell back to the car, down the canyon, and back to campus, just in time for class. Shooting gallery. I was almost killed in the mountains. I used to work at a security company with a bunch of friends. We all got along well, and most of us even hung out after work. The ones I didn't hang out with kept to themselves. There were two brothers that worked night shifts with me, and they were in their own group. They were new to the company and would have many conversations about their guns. Bill was the older brother, and Luke was the younger brother. After hearing Luke and Bill talk about target shooting so much, I developed an interest. I don't own a single firearm, but my roommate owns several. I mentioned at work one night that I was going shooting in the morning with my roommate, and I needed a good place to go. Well, the two brothers pointed out a spot on Google Earth for me and said it was great, and they have shot up there before. It was about 45 minutes away, and higher up in the mountains. I knew the spot precisely due to a single image posted to the coordinates on Google Earth, with used shotgun shells covering the ground. I decided that was as good a spot as any and told my roommate Don where to drive us. We arrived the next morning at 10 a.m. and parked at the top of the hill. We saw our spot about 150 yards away in a clearing down in the valley and began hiking down. On a quick side note, I wear this very bright neon yellow hooded sweatshirt at work and during the winter. I'm also a pretty large fella. Being big and brightly colored makes you very visible from very far away. I've seen hunters using bright colors to avoid accidentally getting shot by other hunters. I decided to wear my trademark bright hoodie on our little hike. We made it a quarter way down the hill and I see a group of fellow target shooters at our desired spot. These were the only people we had seen in 30 minutes. Our spot's taken. Lame, I said. The second I said lame, that's where shit hits the fan. We're on the side of a mountain, walking down towards them, and the rounds start flying. The group was shooting at us. Don and I were targets for about 3 guns, and we didn't have immediate cover. I see Don running across the mountain, strafing the shooters. I see what he was running for. It was a small plateau about 20 yards next to us. The sounds of bullets flying inches away from my ears is a sound I will never forget. Movies do not do the sound justice at all. Not even close. I still get chills thinking about it now. The vibration and rotation of the bullets chilled my bones. It's not a sound I ever want to hear again. It made everything go slow-mo and very clear. My adrenaline was kicking in. We made it to cover and hit the dirt. We were pinned down, but we had cover now. I had to have heard at least 100 rounds pass just over the tip of the plateau. I heard a pistol, a rifle, and a shotgun. I know I did. The trees, boulders, and mountainside were being hammered by round after round. If we sat up from our cover, we'd have been shot in the face. These people were shooting up a hill towards a road. They had their backs to the paper targets. Thinking back on it, my father said I should have yelled down to them to let them know that they were shooting at 2 people and to hold their fire. But the thing is, I think they knew they were shooting at us. How could they not? We weren't that far and the mountainside was almost bare. I didn't want to let them know they were close to hitting us. I should have shot back. We had the high ground, but I'm not a killer. We just waited and listened for their footsteps and wanted them to stay where they were. If we were killed, no one would find our bodies out there. 15 minutes went by and the gunfire didn't let up until it just ended. The mountain was quiet again. After 5 more minutes of silence, we checked down the hill. They were gone. We had our guns ready as we scanned the valley down below. Nothing. No more guys, no vehicle, just their garbage left behind. We decided this was a great time to get out of the hills. We made it back to our car and back to our house faster than ever. When I went back to work the next shift, I told that story to everyone. I even thanked Bill for the sweet advice. He apologized for the bad locals and said that was crazy. Another coworker told me Bill and Luke went out shooting the same morning I did, in the same area. I asked Bill about it, and I asked him where he went shooting and what guns he brought to the shoot. He pointed at the same Google Earth image as before. Luke, his friend Bill were using a Glock and a .22 rifle and a 12-gauge shotgun. It was all coming together so quickly. I told him he was a psycho and he almost killed us. He denied shooting at us and even changed his mind about where they were shooting. He said he was actually 2 miles west because his GPS was inaccurate. I knew he was lying, but what could I do? I had no proof. He worked with me for another 2 years before I moved away and never heard from him again. I remember how emotionless he was when he denied shooting at me. He was like a robot. We never spoke of it after the first time, and I haven't gone shooting since. The dog on the road. This particular event happened almost a year ago, sometime in mid-October. A couple friends and I drove out to visit old friends of ours from high school, George, who now lived about an hour out of the city. We spent the whole day with him, and it was really late when we finally decided to start the drive back home. My friend Lisa was passed out in the passenger seat. She'd had a few drinks and decided to spend the ride home asleep. My other friend Sam was sitting in the back seat behind Lisa and was playing a game on her smartphone. I, of course, was driving. I was following the GPS's instructions back to the freeway. At that moment, we were driving down a dark street with thick trees bordering both sides. Everything was pretty peaceful, with the only sounds I could hear being that of the car moving along the road and the radio on low volume. Suddenly, my car let out a loud jolt and felt as if I had hit something. Sam let out a shocked scream while Lisa remained dead asleep. I slammed on the brakes, and the car came to a halt. I was breathing heavily when I asked what the hell had just happened. Sam peered through the back window and gasped. She turned to me with an angry look on her face and shouted that I had just hit a dog. I looked through the back window, and sure enough, a dog was lying in the road a few yards behind the car. Sam is a pretty big animal lover, so I wasn't surprised to see her get pissed at me. She was about to open her door and rush to the animal's aid when I stopped her. Once I had gotten over the shock of running over the dog, I got a feeling in my gut that told me something was off. I'm no braggart, but I consider myself to be very attentive and a safe driver. My eyes were on the road at all times, and I distinctly remember not seeing a dog on the road prior to the car jolting. Yeah, it was dark, but I was sure I would have at least seen the dog in the headlights before hitting it. I looked through the back window and took a closer look at the dog, or at least as much as I could make out in the reddish light coming from my taillights. It was a fairly big dog, at least a golden retriever or something like that. One particular detail caught my attention. I could see the tail's dog wagging. Now, I'm no expert on the mannerisms of animals, but I'm sure the last thing a dog would do after being hit by a car would be to wag its tail. After a moment of thought, I pressed my foot down on the accelerator and sped off. Sam snapped at me and ordered me to go back, but I told her something was wrong with the whole situation. She continued to argue, but she fell silent as she turned back towards the back window. She asked, "What the heck?" with a shaken voice. I looked in the rearview mirror. Though it was dark, I was able to make out the silhouettes of 3 large figures emerging from the trees on the side of the road. The dog was now up on its feet and jumping around joyfully. The 3 figures looked in our direction as I pressed my foot down on the gas harder and sped off. Sam and I remained silent for the rest of the ride home. It wasn't until a few days later we told Lisa about it. We've been back to visit George a few times since then, but always make sure to leave before sunset. Still dread to think what would have happened if we had gotten out of the car.